Hi everybody, this is Mark Zanoni. I'm the Leadership Center Director at Camp Manito-wish YMCA, and I am here with your trail tip of the day. And today we're going to talk about something which on a day like today would be perfect to have a nice campfire. But we're going to apply it to trail and talk a little bit about the ways that it works best and some real key things that you need to pay attention to as you're getting your fire ready and as you're getting ready to light it. So we're going to touch on several things, things that I learned over the years. I ran a wilderness survival school before I came to Camp Manito-wish, and the skills that I learned there are applied pretty directly to trail in the kind of circumstances that we do trail at Camp Manito-wish. And we need to find some ways to take those lessons, especially the lessons that I taught and the things that I learned from people over the years as they were talking to me about ways to get fire under particularly adverse conditions when it's difficult outside. It may not be 100% dry, or we all know that, and we've all experienced that if we've been on trail. So there's a few things that are real key here, and I'm going to get into that here in a minute, but I want to talk about some of the really important things to think about in advance. Because I think one of the things that was a really important lesson that was given to me through the years was that the more care you put into what you do, especially when you're out in the woods, and you really, if you think about it, you've got nothing but time, right? You're out there in the woods and it's relaxed. But if you put some prep into this and think a little bit ahead as you're preparing for your day, when you get to your campsite and you get ready to make a fire, you'll be all set to be able to make that happen. So those are some really important things. A few things that I think are really important to consider here is that there's some key science that applies. You need to find kind of a mix between a number of different things here and have a real efficient setup that helps you to take advantage of that. So we need to think about airflow, you need to think about compaction, and you need to think about surface area of the materials that you're using. So you want to have airflow. That's really important. In fact, I was always taught that the way that you set your fire up is in relation to the wind, and think about airflow, that you design your fire structure like you would a chimney to take advantage of those things. And then compaction. You don't want to have distance between your layers. I see people build these teepees with these great big distances between layers, and as a result, you don't have very efficient burning. And when you don't have efficient burning, the byproduct of inefficient burning is smoke. And so that's one of the great things about doing some of the things I'm going to talk about here, is if you do this right, you can pretty much have a smokeless fire, which we all want to have as we're sitting around that fire at night. So smokeless, part of the keys of that is efficiency. So we want to be efficient in terms of the fuel that we're using and not wasting fuel. And we want whatever this structure is that we're going to build to be adaptable. So as we turn it into a cooking fire or a heating fire or just a really nice fire to sit around at night, that we can take whatever we have started with and adapt it to meet all those needs. And so that is exactly what we are going to start with here, and we're going to walk you through that process. Stick around. All right, so now I talked about preparation and how important preparation was. So there's a few things that I learned over the years after being out in the woods and being on trail for many days and on many trips, is that being prepared was important. So as I go through my day, I actually gather some materials, and I might have some things like this. Got inner barks of various kinds of trees. This is the inner bark of cedar, but the inner bark of aspen is really good, usually really fluffy and airy when it's dry, and that's one of the important things. And also birch bark. And in this case, birch bark is an amazing thing that we have here up in northern Wisconsin, because it has oils in the bark that will help you to get a fire going even if it's damp outside, even if the birch bark is kind of wet and damp. And that's a pretty amazing thing. Not every place has that, so you have to look around for fluffy, airy materials, and that's real crucial. So aside from that, I'm prepped here in terms of all of my sizes. I talked a lot about in the beginning about increasing surface area, and one of the ways that you do that is to start with very small, almost like matchstick size small pieces of wood. And I'm going to gather those in places that are fairly sheltered, so sheltered from the elements, and try to gather that stuff sometimes in advance if I can, but not necessarily. Even in a rainstorm, you can go down underneath evergreen trees and find some real dry stuff under there. So you're going to know that it's dry when it makes this nice snapping sound as you break it. If it doesn't do that, then it tells you that there's some dampness. It may be slightly green. Sometimes that's not always obvious when you look at it. But I've got small stuff here, real small stuff. I'm going to go to another size here that's a little bit bigger, another size bigger yet, and another size bigger yet. And then we've got some stuff that's a little bit bigger yet still. For most fires that I do, I never go bigger than thumb size. So the thickness of my thumb is about what you need for most of the fires that you're going to build. You get beyond that and you end up in a situation where, you know, because of lack of surface area, you're going to end up with a lot of smoke. So efficiency is important. Gather a lot of smaller stuff. Set your fire up so that it's efficient. And I'll talk about maybe a couple of ways to do that. But I'm actually going to build the fire now. We're getting ready to build the fire now. So one thing that I was taught a long time ago was about how important it is to have a platform, something that you set. You have all this nice fluffy, airy material here like your birch bark or other kinds of barks like that. You want to be able to set that on something that is up off of the wet ground. And you can feel that, you know, I can feel down here in the ground, even though it looks sort of dry, I can feel that it is, with the back of my hand in particular, that it's damp there. So I want to make sure that my fluffiest area stuff is going to be off of that damp ground. So one way that I learned to do this is to set up what I call a little platform, and I'm going to take 2 sticks and lay them like that, and another one that's going to lay like this. And my birch bark eventually is going, or my other material, is going to sit right down on top of the center of that. So now it's sitting up and it's up off the ground. And even the reason why I build it the way that I do is that the air can come in, and it may be a little bit difficult for that to happen here in this little fireplace, but usually it can come in this way and go up through my chimney that I'm going to build above this. So so right here where this crosses, like this, right here in this spot is going to be where my airflow is. And so I'm thinking about that. Remember, that was one of the things that I said that was really important as you do this, is to think about airflow. So one of the tricks that I learned years ago, and one of the keys here, is building things small. So I'm going to take a Y stick, and everybody can see that, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to put that into the ground, sort of build myself a little support. Then take a couple of other small pieces and lay those in here to create a little bit of a teepee structure. I want to make sure that that's big enough and strong enough then that it's going to be able to withstand the weight that I have and the material that I'm going to put on. Then, like I said in the beginning, I'm going to start with the smallest material that I have. So I'm going to start with the very smallest things. I'm going to lay a layer of that on here. Then I'm going to take my next biggest material, lay another layer on top of that, and I'm laying these layers directly against each other. Remember I talked about that being so important, that you want airflow, but you don't want so much airflow that you are absolutely not going to get connection between and compaction between the layers. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to set it up. I'll lay a couple of layers on here, and then we'll go from there. So stick around. Got more coming. Right. So I've got the structure pretty much built. I mean, if you can see it now, you can see that I've got some really thin stuff, all those smaller things that I had, and those are right against that tripod, against that little teepee that I set up. Next biggest layers and next biggest layers and next biggest layers. I just kept going on and getting bigger and bigger. I'm going to take this, make sure that I'm not setting my fluffy, airy stuff on the dirt, on the wet, in the dirt. And I'm going to take, sorry, moving across you. I'm going to lay some of my bigger pieces now, my last layer, right tight against the outside of this structure. So I am really laying this tight. And again, like I've talked about before, sometimes I will see people take this last layer, these last layers, and lay them so that there's this much distance out here between the little teepee on the inside and the that last big layer. So I've got all these layers now laying pretty tight, and in terms of airflow, I've got airflow, but I've also got a certain amount of compaction too, in the sense that those layers are right against each other. Now I'm going to take to this stuff, and you'll notice that one thing I did here, and this is another thing that I was taught early on in my journey here, is to always leave a door. So a lot of times I'll leave that door, and you can see that I've even done this where that airflow, I talked about that airflow coming in underneath here and then up. And I left a door though too, so I can take this nice fluffy airy material, and I'm going to fluff it up here just a little bit. And I'm going to lay this in here. I'm going to put some birch bark in here first, and that's going to just go on top of that platform there. So I've got a nice little nest going on in there. On top of that, I'm going to take some of this fluffy airy material, kind of pack it in there. So now I'm ready to start my fire. And now if I do this right, it should go up pretty quickly. And we should have minimal smoke here as we do this. So I'm going to use a lighter. My favorite way to start a fire though is to use a hand drill or a bow drill, but we're going to stick with our modern methods. And I shouldn't really even need to do much to it now. It's just going to catch on those layers and kind of spread through the structure. You can see there's a little bit of smoke here as it starts to get going. And we're just going to kind of watch that go. But now at this point, I shouldn't really have to do anything. I've got all my preparation. I've made sure that everything is working pretty well. And we'll just see what happens. So we've got airflow coming in underneath and a nice chimney action that's happening. And notice how that just spread through all the layers just really neatly and nicely. Couple of things that have happened over the years. I mean, I've taken pieces of birch bark, and even though my fire was sitting kind of in the middle of a puddle in the middle of a rainstorm, just floated that birch bark and everything in underneath my teepee, and it caught and lit just like this, just like it just did now. So happy fire building. Looking forward to seeing everybody. Stay tuned for all the updates and different things that we have going on here at Manito-wish, and we'll keep you informed. I may even do a part 2 to this because we are not entirely done. All right, thanks everybody. I guess once again, my name is Mark. I'll see you soon.